live if you need to.
Yeah, I'll do that now. Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. Hopefully some of you were in yesterday's where we ran through some basics in Business Central. Most of you will recognise my voice from our other Power Hours that we run every Friday. Got a small bit of housekeeping before we got started. We've got a Q&A panel open for questions, where if you have any throughout the session, we'll be getting Steve to chat through any of those afterwards. I'll be monitoring it, and we'll save some time at the end to cover those ones off. We'll be starting at about 3 minutes past, just to make sure everyone can get in. If you've got any problems, then we can get those sorted in that time. I'll wait until the 3 minutes past, and then I'll hand you guys over to Steve, and we'll make sure that you get a good session.
Hi everyone, my name's Steve Brooks and welcome to our PowerHour Live today. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. It's a little bit strange not being able to see any of you, but here's my name anyway, and hopefully you can all hear me all right. So yeah, I guess kind of by now a lot of you are very much in the swing of things with kind of lockdown and working from home, and hopefully for those of you for whom sort of some sense of kind of normality's come back, you're able to kind of turn your mind to the things that were on it before, instead of all these kind of quarantine practicalities. So what we're trying to do really with this whole week is to get the most out of the systems that you're using. So I guess that's whether you're a kind of a prospect to CPIT, a user of Business Central, or a user of Nav. The aim of today really is to do that, to make sure you're getting the most out of everything. So I like to start everything with a good quote, because all these people are much more intelligent than me. This first one here about data beats emotions, it's actually from the guy who created Tinder, which is a bit of a strange choice, but he's worth $3.1 billion, so he must be doing something right. And for those of you who like something a little bit more kind of cerebral, this is from a computer science professor at Yale. And I guess the point is, regardless of which of those people you most kind of align yourself to, the data is important. And so whoever you are on the call, whether you're an end user, FD, MD, I think there's something that we can all take from these quotes. I think particularly at kind of SMB level, there's a real temptation to either rely on our guts, our emotions, our kind of feelings towards what we're trying to prove, or if we do have some data, potentially it's not very good. We try to make the most of poor data, so that could be things like, looking at the trial balance 3 months after the month end and desperately trying to draw conclusions to the month before. And very often we've got kind of very patchy information. And, in these kind of weird times that we've got at the moment, it's really important to be able to understand your business very, very clearly. Anyone on our webinar the other week will have seen some insight from one of our corporate finance partners, Andy Parker, and he explained that access to things like bank funding relies on accurate data and a solid business plan. And so what I'd like to get across today really is that with the right KPIs and with the right insight into your data, you'll be able to kind of continue making those right decisions for your business. So I want to talk through what you can do in Business Central when it comes to reporting. Take it one step just before that and kind of talk about KPI setting and things like that in the first place. And we'll talk through what you can do as both standard and using add-ons to drive great quality reporting. You should say that everything that we see on screen will be Business Central, but a huge amount of this will work in Nav as well. There'll be some connectivity things when we're talking about hooking up Jet Reports and PowerBI and whatnot, but showing today you could do and should at least give it a try in your existing version of Nav if that's what you're on. So just before we kind of get into the options, it's worth pointing out just how many resources there are around kind of KPIs and setting targets for your business. And far be it from me to tell you how to sort of set the right ones for your business. Only you can know that, but it is important to sort of state that reporting, and regardless of how pretty that reporting is, and we'll see some things today that look great, it's only going to be useful if that's applicable to your business. And so I think that although like I just said, I can't set those KPIs for you, I think the best thing that those of you on the call can do to begin with is think about reporting strategy. I mean, you can do that internally. I know a lot of businesses don't necessarily do this. Certainly, I'm responsible for a P&L here, and the amount of time I get to actually sit and think about, or what are our meaningful metrics, what's going to really help me understand whether my business is doing well, you know, that time is relatively minimal, but it's so important. So anyway, we want to be putting that kind of strategy at the forefront of what's being measured. And I actually found a good website, which I'll just kind of, the references in the corner of the next slide, to kind of guide you through the considerations you should make when you are thinking about setting KPIs. And I do think it's worth spending a bit of time on this just before we hop over into the reporting options, because as I go through what those options are, I want you to think about, well, what would I want to report on? You know, if I'm a manufacturing business, am I talking about kind of volumes of output, or am I talking about profitability of the time of the people that I've got? Am I talking about quality of the things that I sell, and so on? And hopefully, if you've got a kind of thought in mind about how would I apply this to my business, it will make some of these options that we see all the more kind of realistic. So this website, kpi.org, very creatively named website, has got a great list of sort of how you should think about setting KPIs in the first place. I'm just going to kind of step through each of these very briefly. I think, you know, the first one, it seems so obvious, but it's really about making sure everybody's on the same page. So, you know, I touched before about, you know, maybe on the one hand, you'd like to improve profitability of a range that you sell within your product line. But we need to be really clear kind of what good looks like. And, you know, if we make 50% gross margin now, are we happy with 51 or 60? Or if we're talking about something within a team, you know, maybe within finance, like we really want to reduce aged debt. Does that mean that we want to focus on the overall older debt, like a kind of cash collection or payments terms issue? Or do we want to focus instead on invoices that are old because they're in dispute, which could be more of a billing and data accuracy issue? So what I'm trying to say here really is what might be clear to one person isn't necessarily clear to the other, and it's important that as a sort of a leadership team, you know, whether that's you and a couple of others, you know, a board, whatever it is, it's important that from the absolute beginning you're in agreement on kind of what good looks like. This next point might not apply to your business, but it's about saying sort of can something be measured directly? If not, what might you need to do to measure sort of alternatives? So before I talked about things like product quality, that could actually be quite difficult to say tangibly how something's improved or kind of failed to improve. But maybe you could track things like return rate over a time period, for example. Third point is around, you know, making the KPIs effective, making them realistic. Are they going to be useful? Are they going to be a faff to gather the data together? Do you have the right systems in place to get the data? And if so, do you know where within those systems it's going to come from? It's this point that I think is where things like Jet Reports and PowerBI that we'll see can come in. They can speed up the process for reporting and for gathering the right data, for bringing it from multiple places within your system, instead of having to, if you like, hand crank it out of the system, joining things together in Excel and really going through a very manual, unrepeatable process. Step 4 is around outlining that actually sometimes a measure by itself isn't enough. So customer satisfaction may require, you know, measuring customer satisfaction may require surveys, support tickets, data on whether customers have regular account management meetings and that sort of thing. So these composite indices are around saying, well, actually, sometimes it's very difficult to measure something just by one number, but can we get a feeling for how this measure is improving or not by looking at a series of different data points? Point 5. Set targets and thresholds. This is very straightforward. This is about making sure that you've got clear targets. So do we want to retain a rolling 12-month gross margin of 50%? Fine. Our thresholds then need to be, say, green is over 50, yellow is 40 to 50, and red is below 40. It's pretty straightforward, but actually we do come across a lot of people that won't necessarily have thought around what does that kind of target number look like. And then the final point, and arguably one of the most important, and where things like Power BI are the most useful, This define and document point is where you bring together all of the work from those steps above and present a kind of overall view for your business. I really like the idea of scorecards. I don't know if you guys have come across those before, and it springs to mind that perhaps I ought to have put a slide in that shows those, but here we are. So this is really where you kind of present all of those KPIs that you've decided on, documented, set thresholds for into a single view, because having that data kind of visible, live and present is the key to making it part of the management team's routine. I think if the KPIs are seen or setting them, you know, if you go away and kind of go through these kind of 6 processes for your business, or if you have done this already, if those KPIs that you decide on are seen as a one-time project that, oh, well, we did that, we set those, it didn't make much of a difference. Well, that's probably because it was a one-time project and it probably won't impact the business too much. But if you've got that data visible and you're using these as a real driver for conversations around the board table or in leadership meetings, then it can be very helpful, and you all understand what you're looking at, and ideally as a management team or leadership team or whatever it is, you were all part of the conversation to say this is what's important to our business. I should say as well, I mean, I've been mentioning leadership teams and management teams, but really this is any group of people that this applies to where some sort of data reporting is important. So that could be across the credit control department, that could be across the purchase ledger team. It doesn't need to be whoever's running the business. I think all of those steps that we just talked through are applicable to groups of people that need to kind of see improvement or monitor performance in their business. So like I said, that's about sort of setting the scene and thinking about, well, why are KPIs important, and why am I in particular kind of banging on about them. Like I said, I'd like you to kind of think about these examples really of what we can do in NAV and Business Central to think about how we can relate those back to KPIs for your own business. So your options really in Business Central kind of break down into 4 key areas. There's standard reporting and account schedules, both of which are, if you like, kind of out the box. And then there's third-party solutions like Jet Reports, like PowerBI. There are other third-party solutions available as well, but broadly they break down into sort of these. They look very similar to things like Jet Reports and PowerBI, which are the ones that we think do a great job, and certainly from a PowerBI point of view are very much part of Office and Microsoft 365. So a part of that family of Microsoft products that you're used to. And this is what we're going to talk through today. We don't want to spend a huge amount of time on standard reports because they are just standard. So I'm going to show you sort of how to get access to those, and you can kind of find out what's in Business Central from that perspective. And also, if you were on the session yesterday with Harry, you would have seen some guidance on how you can create your own views and filters and save those to your own Business Central or NAV environment. And actually, I think a lot of the time, people don't necessarily kind of realize, and by now, hopefully you do if you were on the call yesterday, but don't necessarily realize the power of those views and filters in replacing what would have otherwise been a report out to Excel. So first things first, standard reports. There's a whole load in Business Central and NAV. I'm just going to kind of flip over to a video now, which I will try to talk over. Hopefully it will play as we go through. So this is the kind of Business Central role center, and there's reports here on the main screen, but probably the best way to see all the reports is the top right hand icon is what's called the Explore menu. And if you hit on Explore All, you then have this kind of overview of all the modules in the system, and you can keep on drilling down. So I went into finance in this video, and you can see that there's reports within each section of finance: general ledger, receivables, payables, and so on. And then in the expanded version, you just click or unclick on reports, and it will bring up or drop down all of the different reports that are available to you. So you can see there in receivables, there's, you know, aged debtors, there's top customers, there's you know, top product sales by customer and that sort of thing, and likewise in payables, inventory, general ledger. So as well as those kind of standard reports like aged debtors, aged creditors, and trial balance, there are a lot of other standard reports in Business Central that are worth looking at. Certainly, even if you just want to kind of get a flavour for what's there, you know, and if you need to sort of then make a change to it, you may be able to change one of these existing reports rather than have something built from scratch, or use this as an example for a report that you could build in Jet Reports. So I'll stop that looping round. I said I wouldn't spend too long on standard reports, but I would encourage you to go off and look at those. There's just not a huge amount of value I can really add to those other than to explain to you how many there are and where to get them. One of the things that, though, you can do a little bit more with is account schedules. So I've got a short video here from one of our consultants, Tom, who's a dab hand at account schedules, and he's going to take you through what they are and a kind of brief overview of how to actually create one of your own.
This session will be covering account schedules, so it will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. We'll start off with just what they are, what they're used for, and then we'll jump into some sort of tips and tricks, I guess. So in terms of what they are, for those that aren't using account schedules in the system, they're really sort of the key to reporting. They allow you to build and format custom reports in the system, and this video will cover very briefly how to pull some quick reports together, as well as those sort of handy bits to boost your reporting capabilities. So kicking things right off, those that aren't using account schedules, I'll just search for account schedules at the top, and you want this one. It's account schedules with an S. This one will try and run a report for you. So when we get to this screen, I'll just go straight ahead and create a new one. So I'll just call it sales, for example. And I'll go to process at the top, and we'll go to edit account schedule. So this is really sort of our blank canvas where we can create that custom report. So we can get started really quickly by going insert at the top and insert GL accounts. So I see a lot of clients spending a lot of time making their chart of accounts look really good. So we might as well use some of that formatting you've already done. So just for now, if I just want the income accounts, I'll select the top income, and then I'll hold shift and click on this total income here. And you'll see Business Central will select a range of accounts for me, and I'll hit OK. So straight away, our report has some structure to it. So we've got some accounts brought in. You'll see it's nicely indented it for us. The row numbers are pulled from the account numbers, and I'll just very quickly run down and adjust these. So it's worth spending a bit of time on. Obviously, if you are reporting straight out of the system, you don't want to sort of format it again when you get into Excel or anything like that. You just want it to look good at this point. So I'll adjust those row numbers. Moving across, we've got the description, and this is the bit that will appear on your account schedule. And then we have these two fields, so the totaling type and totaling. So you can see here, this totaling type is picking up posting accounts. So it'll be looking on your chart of accounts, and it will go, I need posting account 10100, and it will pull that through for us. What we can also do is set a range of totaling accounts to pull through. So just on this top one, I'm going to select a range of posting accounts, so this range here, and it will actually pull them all through just on this one line. The main difference between that, and you'll see here we've got a total accounts, is that we'll still have full breakdown when we drill in on this line. And as I say, we'll have a look at that in just a second. We can also do other things here. So we can set things like formulas, we can set bases for percentages and things like that. So you might choose that you want a formula that is, I don't know, income services as a ratio of, or as a percentage of total income. And all you would need to make sure there is that in your totaling in here, you're referencing the row number. So when we're talking about posting or totaling accounts, we're talking about the chart of accounts. When we're talking about the formulas, we're talking about just this account schedule. Moving over, row type, we've got net change, balance at date, beginning balance. So obviously at the minute we're talking about sales, we're talking about income statement. So we want to leave this on net change. If you were looking at balance sheet or anything like that, you'll want your balance at date. You'll see because we can get them all on the same report, you can be quite flexible in what you're pulling through. Your amount type, very straightforward. You've got net, debit or credit. Unless it's some sort of, you know, error identification or something like that, you'll probably always want this on net amount. And then a really handy one, we've got this show opposite sign. So if you're reporting to anyone that isn't in finance, that maybe accountancy isn't their sort of main focus, they might not know sales is going to be a credit value. It's going to come up as a negative. If you just tick these boxes, you'll see it actually forces them to at least look positive in the report. So as I say, very handy for your reporting. You can choose to show or hide columns. So if you're just using any rows for formulas or things like that, you can choose to hide them. You can also choose to, as you can see here, set criteria on it. So if any column is not 0, if positive or negative, you can set those criteria. Just for now, I'm going to click show and we're just going to have a look at what comes up. And then we've got some additional formatting at the end. So we've got bold, italic, underline. We'll go fancy on this first line and we'll just see how it pulls through. Okay, so at this point we need to take a look at it. So if I overview on this, you'll see it's pulled it through for us. We've got all our nice row numbers. We've got our descriptions, but we don't have any figures yet. And you'll see what it's actually done is it's applied a default column layout and it's applied a date filter. So just for now, I'm going to head back to January and I'm going to adjust this column layout to net change because obviously, as I say, we're viewing sales, we're viewing net change. Okay, so we can see already it's pulled through some information for us. This income line and this total income line, as I said before, they are doing the same thing. But if I drill in on this total income, you'll see actually all we've got is one account and it's total income. And I can drill into this and that's great, but ultimately we're not getting the best data out of it. If I jump back and I click into this income one at the top, you'll see it gives me a range of different accounts. And I can drill into any one of these and get the full filtered view on it. So if I drill into this one, for example, you'll see straight away we've got a breakdown of all of our amounts that make up that balance. You'll also see here that we've got budgeted amounts. So just on these 3 accounts where we've got a net change, we also have budgeted figures. So David will be going into budgeting in more detail with you. But just for now, in terms of getting it into the report, we've got a few different bits we need to be aware of. So you'll see here we've got a GL budget filter, and that will actually determine which budget we're looking at, which budget we're talking about. But we also want to try and get it into the actual columns so we can view them side by side. So if I just click on the 3 dots on column layout name and hit new at the top, and I'll just call this sales for now. So we're going to edit this column layout, and what we're going to have is we're going to have a very simple actual budget variance. So column number, I'm just going to pop in actual just to keep it very sort of straightforward. And then budget, and then the last column, variance. Okay, so actual, we can leave it just as it is. It will pull up the actual, and you can see it's pulling net change here. The budget column, again, we want it to pull net change, but actually what we want it to pick up is these budget entries. So you can see this is picking up general ledger entries, this is picking up budget entries. For our variance, what we need is a formula. So we need to do our actual less our budget. So we set our column type to formula. You can see if I just move across a little bit that we have a formula box here. And in here, again, we're referencing the columns. So we're not referencing GL accounts or anything like that. Okay, let's have a look at that. Right, so what we can see here is, again, we've got our row layout has sort of retained itself. We've got our column layout now. So we've got actual, we've got budget, and we've got variance. And this variance we can see is working off the sum of these two. Okie doke. So that's sort of the start of your reporting. You know, we've got a very simple variance, we've got a breakdown of sales. If we now want it by date or by dimension, for example, we can also add that into the report. So as you saw before, I was adjusting the date filter up here. But if I just jump back into this column layout, you'll see we've got comparison date formulas, comparison period formulas, and you can actually put in here, so in the comparison date formula, for example, if you were doing actual versus actual of last month, you could pop in the formula like -1M, and that would take you back a month, where you could then do a formula on that. You'll also see department code. So department code is one of the global dimensions for this company. And we can actually filter down the columns based on a particular dimension. So while we can filter down the whole report for a dimension, we can also do it at column level. So you might have actual budget variance for admin and then actual budget variance for production. If you didn't want to do that, and you just wanted one sales report that you applied filters to, you'll see up here, we've got department and customer group filter. So again, these are the global dimensions. Okie doke. So you've produced your report, you're happy with how it looks, and now you need to send it out to someone. Maybe someone that isn't on Business Central, a head of department or whatever it might be. To get this into a format to send them out, we go Actions, Excel, and we create a new document. And what that will do is it will give us a brand new spreadsheet. If I just drag it over now, and you'll notice that all of our formatting has been retained. So we've got this underlined, bold, italic, everything, as well as our column layouts. Any filters that we apply to that report will show at the top. So if we have dimension filters on it, for example, we'll see them up here. What we lose in this is that drill down. So we can't see what is making up this income balance Obviously, we have the breakdown underneath, but just something to be aware of, that if there are users that aren't on BC, you might want to either add some more information into the report, or maybe consider, a team member license so that they can get on and run these reports. Okay, so as I say, David is going to be covering budgeting in more detail. So to get these budgets into the right sort of format, to get into an account schedule. And Joe will also be talking about a cash flow. So getting sort of cash flow reports into the system as well. Okay, so a bit of a whistle-stop tour from me. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you.
So that was a video there from, like I said, one of our consultants, Tom, and I think it's a really great overview there on account schedules. You can see kind of just how much reporting power they've got, and they've got the ability there to send all of that information out to Excel as well for sharing. And it's one of those areas where, I think we said the title for this webinar is going to be everything we could fit in an hour, and I appreciate it's pretty high level and maybe hard to follow, although I'd encourage you to kind of download the recording if you'd like to give those a try for yourself. But account schedules are an excellent way of starting that kind of KPI journey of comparing things like actuals to budget and checking out variances and doing the comparison on a department by department level, really drilling into those dimensions and understanding what it is about those different kind of departments or customer groups or regions or whatever it is that you've got your dimensions set to. So I'm just going to move the slides on to talk about Jet reports and Power BI. So we talked about so far that, as I said, the kind of standard Business Central options, and you might also have heard us talking a lot about Jet reports and Power BI. So I'm going to give an overview of what they do, what they're for, and then I'll relate it back to those KPI points that I talked about earlier. So both Jet reports and Power BI are reporting tools, clearly, and they both connect to Business Central and Nav. They also both allow you to create reports of your own. So I think at this point, you may sort of say, well, actually, what's the difference, and why should I choose one over the other? I think from my experience, Jet is arguably better for ad hoc reporting. It's a little bit quicker, I think, to kind of get the data going. There's a lot of kind of template reports that you can build on and hook up to your Business Central. So there's actually a big kind of suite of sample reports that work very nicely. And because it's Excel based, it's also tends to be very popular with finance departments. So we get kind of head of departments or FCs or FDs who heavily work in Excel already, really kind of liking the power of Jet reports. Power BI is on the whole a more powerful tool. It can connect to more data sources. It's much more visual. It's got its own kind of scripting language and things like that in there for power users, but you definitely can create your own reports, and we'll have a look at that today as well. So first things first, we're going to look at Jet, and like I said, this is an Excel based report building and business intelligence tool. And I'm just going to shoot over to the next slide, which is a video I recorded of how it works. It's pretty much me running through a demo, so you'll see it kind of going ahead. But do ask questions if you're not sure about any of the stuff that I've gone through on this video. Most of the time I just recorded the video so that, well, as I say, one coming up, I avoid any error messages, and you guys avoid having to look at any loading screens. But that's why we're here on the call as well. So if there's anything that you see to kind of pique your interest to ask a question, just pop it in the chat. So this is Jet Reports. Jet Reports is an Excel-based reporting tool, and you can see at the top here, I've got just a normal Microsoft Excel, and you've got your kind of normal ribbon buttons along the top. But once you've got Jet Reports installed, you also get this extra option. And what this does is it actually connects straight through to your Business Central or Dynamics Nav. Business Central is really easy because it's got single sign-on, so you just put in the same Office 365 username and password that you would normally use. And then once you've established a connection, you get this kind of drop-down menu. And what this lets us do is live connect to any of the companies that you've got in your Business Central or Nav database. And as well as that, you can have kind of multiple connections. So if you've got multiple Nav installs, or you've got multiple production environments in your Business Central, there's no limit really to using those and kind of switching between them. And so all of Jet Reports is used and accessed from this ribbon. But the whole point of it, the whole kind of reason for Jet is that it's Excel based. You know, it's familiar, it's a kind of look and feel that you're used to. And although we kind of talk a lot about not necessarily wanting to use Excel for reporting purposes, that's not because Excel is not a good tool, it's because it doesn't have kind of live data, and it often requires a lot of manual manipulation, and that's really the gap that Jet Reports fills. And so what we're looking at here, this screen here, is a kind of a demo that hooks up to our demo environment. And it's just something simple, you know, it's an income statement report. And what Jet can do is go and access sort of any table from anywhere in the database. And if you kind of join us later on in our Power Week, you'll see more about Jet Reports from them themselves. So I won't go kind of too much into it, but where we see it being really popular from a CPIT point of view is with finance teams, people that want to create kind of ad hoc reports and maybe just kind of build something as an end user. You know, let me download a list of everything that was shipped in the last week and check that back to lists of customers whose credit limit has exceeded. You know, you could do that in Power BI, and I'll show you Power BI as well. But that sort of ad hoc report, you might not need to run it again. And using standard nav, hooking up shipments with the customer list of kind of exceeded credits is quite tricky. Jet Reports lets you join those two tables together. So there's some really neat use cases for it. And thinking back to that kind of KPI point that I talked about earlier, there's a really kind of great, it's a really kind of great tool for saying, okay, well, I've established those KPIs, I've understood what those thresholds are. This is going to be the way that I actually kind of access that data without, you know, hand cranking it and manually having to kind of manipulate the report to get the data out each time I want to, you know, refresh that KPI and check on its status. One of the other things that's pretty cool about Jet is that you'll see at the top of this report here, I've got Cronus Company, CP Kickstart, and Cronus UK Limited. Some of the limitations of the standard reporting and the account schedules is that you can only get data out of the company that you're in, certainly as standard. What we're able to do here is actually run a report that in effect does a kind of consolidated income statement. So if I click on the run button in the top left here, it's going to ask me for some options. This was last run on, you know, the calendar year 2018. But if I put in calendar year 2019 and hit run, what that's done is brought in some information now for this Cronus company as well. So that was 0. The numbers that were in Cronus UK have changed. And in effect, what you could do is then say, okay, well, this is the consolidated income statement. And again, one of the core things, if I go into the design mode for this report, is I can hide a column here. I could change this to say subtotal. I could say this is console adjustment, and that this is our final total. I can just use some of the Excel formatting to make the report look the same. I can then add standard Excel formulas to say, let's just take this down as far as this. I can use standard Excel formulas and format painter and things like that. And then you've got this kind of cool combination of Excel reporting plus a live link back to the database to say, well, actually, now I want to say, for example, I know I need to knock out £500 of sales here, put £500 here, because there was some sort of, intercompany sale and purchase going on there. Obviously, it would be difficult to necessarily spot that just from this line, but in a kind of real world example, you may have intercompany sales, intercompany purchases. You can effectively build your consolidation adjustments into Excel. And then when we go to run the actual report again, let's see if this works with 2020. You'll see now that we've effectively created a consolidated P&L. Ignore the numbers in the sense that they're not necessarily that representative, but we've got this kind of great mix of live link back to the data here, plus any consolidation adjustments to get us to a consolidated P&L view, effectively like, I guess, an extended trial balance. So that's one of the kind of really cool things you can do with Jet Reports. But I think what you've seen more than anything is it's very easy to do this. We've effectively kind of changed this report live, rerun the data a few times. It's easy to use, it's intuitive to use. Again, it appeals a lot to accountants that like to build their own reports. And yeah, it's just got a great set of functionality. You can do a huge amount of what Jet can do in Power BI and vice versa. There's a strong overlap between what each of them can do, and in fact they're not mutually exclusive. You can take data out of Jet Reports. In fact, you could take this report that we've been using here and use that as a data source in Power BI to kind of more visually represent some of this information. So to have one doesn't mean that you can't have the other, but it's important to understand where their relative strengths are. So that was, like I said, there, an overview of Jet Reports, and that point that I kind of left on there, the relative strengths, I think it's a really good one, because you to toot my own horn, but you can't, you don't necessarily need to have just one or the other. But when we move on to look at Power BI, for those of you who haven't seen it before, you'll see just how different it looks. And there'll be times when the data that you're trying to represent, like this, like an income statement report, makes more sense to have in an Excel style format versus trying to kind of make it look pretty in Power BI. But to kind of emphasize that point that I made a second ago, if you wanted to turn some of this, like gross profit margin by company as a percentage of the overall total, if you want to turn that into a chart, then all of a sudden Excel isn't the best use, and you may say, well, I'm going to take this data and use it to build out that exact kind of visualization in Power BI. So if I just move on to Power BI, this is, Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence tool, and it competes with similar tools like things like Tableau. They're all kind of visual dashboarding tools, and like I said in my point around talking about the KPIs, they're the best way, I think, to bring together all of the reporting that you want to have on your company in a single place. So the great thing about Power BI is it's free to download and try in the desktop version. So if you're just building reports for yourself and you want to connect up to your Nav or Business Central, there's no cost. The cost of licenses for Power BI is once you start publishing reports and sharing them with other people and accessing them on your mobile and apps and things like that. But there's, other than your time investment, literally no cost and no reason not to give Power BI a try. And so we're going to just look at the like an overview of how it works and bring to life some of the stuff that I've been talking about today. So drawing some of these conclusions on the data that you've got. Before about the importance of setting KPIs, and I think Power BI is the best way of demonstrating just how critical that is. Now, Microsoft have presented a whole load of sort of sample data sets to kind of really show Power BI in its best light. And I'm going to talk you through some of these and kind of relate it back to that point around KPIs, because we talked about the final point in that list being about documentation and presentation of all the different KPIs that you've decided are important for your business. And things like scorecards and kind of dashboards like this are really the best and I guess sort of best practice way of showing those documented KPIs. And so this customer profitability sample from Microsoft is a really good way of showing that. And if you can kind of put yourself in the shoes of the people running this business, they've obviously got a kind of field sales based business, and they want to understand what products sell well, which customers buy those products, what the margin is on those, and where is the distribution of that kind of profit. So if you think about kind of what they've then decided to look at, they've kind of presented those kind of key metrics and those KPIs in this scorecard. And the really cool thing about Power BI is that all of these KPIs interrelate with one another. So when we were again talking earlier about kind of blending different KPIs together and kind of compounding them and seeing the impact of one on the other, Power BI is really great at being able to kind of display those connections. And in fact, when you build reports, they inherently kind of connect to one another. And so what this lets us do is take this kind of sort of relatively static data, which would live update, so the actual data itself wouldn't be static, but the reports would be, and we can actually interact with them. And what we can do immediately is start to see trends in the data that would be very difficult to see just in Excel or in a standard Business Central report. So an example of that is this kind of top right hand side kind of diagram, which shows the kind of proportional representation of the revenue by region of, in this case, the US, but again, kind of could be anywhere. And so you can immediately see that the north and the east of the US represent what, 90% of the revenue for this business. So if you were to do nothing else, you could start questioning, okay, well, why are we even bothering kind of working in the kind of the central or southern regions? Maybe there's a valid reason for doing that, but maybe We actually don't need the travel, the expense, the salesperson even in those regions. Would we be able to get more out of the North and the East if we redeployed that member of the team? Even drawing that simple conclusion would be tough without graphically and visually representing this data. But what's even cooler really is you can then drill into this information. So if we look at these kind of top line numbers here, we've got 83 customers. We sell 7 products in total, and our gross margin is 42.5%. If I click on the northern region, which is the biggest area, you can see that only 12 of my customers, and maybe this really nicely demonstrates that whole 80-20 rule, but only 12 of my customers are in that region. But they're only buying 5 of the products that I sell. And thinking back to that kind of previous screen that I hadn't drilled down on, why is it that 2 of my products aren't sold in my biggest region? And again, looking at the gross margin, that 42.9% that we make in the north, if I unclick this region, that was 42.5%. So not only do I make more revenue in that region, but it's also more profitable revenue. If I go into the east, they only take 5 products as well, but they're lower on the gross margin overall. And if I do drop into the south, they take 5 products. There's only 12 customers there, but the gross margin is a little bit higher. Maybe not high enough to kind of compensate for the travel, the cost, all the rest of it. Bearing in mind, it's only picking up 2 states, Texas and Oklahoma. Again, this is really interesting too, because we can see actually where is that revenue broken down. So the southern region represented by 2 states. Texas has $6,500. Oklahoma has 1.8 million rather, and 6.6 million. Way out on my kind of orders of magnitude there. But that's 6.6 million and 1.8 million. If I go to the north, is tiny when you compare it to the 79 million that I've got there. And if I come off this screen and look instead at the salespeople that are in this area, Andrew Ma is my salesperson, bizarrely, for the whole country, apparently, but is mainly focused in the east. But he's generating 44.9 gross margin. So selling better, getting higher prices from customers than, say, let's look at Carlos, who's only getting 38.5. So maybe great revenue, but only selling 4 of our products and selling them at significantly lower gross margin than Andrew. And you know, it's this sort of conclusion that sort of you can draw, saying, okay, well, what is it about Carlos's customer mix or Andrew's sales technique that we could learn from or do something about, that again would be really tough to do if you were just looking at a Excel report of, you know, transaction dates, posting dates, invoice values. You know, if you're lucky, kind of the cost associated with those line items that you sold. Maybe you then have to kind of cross-reference that back to the customer and find out what geographic region they were in. You could use dimensions in Business Central to kind of tag this data, and obviously some of what Power BI is doing is reporting on that underlying data. It goes back to making sure that the system has got the great, you know, it's got great data in it in the first place. But even with dimensions and the sales line information and the customer location information, we've got an awful lot to try and kind of bring together just using standard Business Central. It obviously can be done because this same information is what Power BI is bringing to life, but by building these dashboards and by building the links between all of those different tables and data sets, you're not having to do that each time you want to kind of go and refresh the data and say, okay, well, let's look at what happened this time last year, or let's look at what happened last month, or maybe let's add in an extra salesperson. And if you were doing this even in Excel, you'd have to kind of do a whole load of extra work to kind of bring that salesperson in. So the whole point, and hopefully this has shown it, albeit at a high level, but the whole point of Power BI is everything that we've been talking about, which is bringing to life the data and the KPIs that you've already decided are so important for your business. And so you really need that right combination of great data, the right system that can push that data out, but then also the right tool to report on it. And it's that combination of those three elements that will really help you take that reporting and that decision making to the next level. And with Power BI, you've also got the option to look at that on an iPad or on a phone, and you can even build layouts that are mobile phone compatible. So maybe of this kind of total team scorecard view, you'd be more interested in just looking at the revenue by region or those headline kind of customer and margin stats. They could be brought front and center in a mobile friendly layout as well. Okay, so I'm slightly conscious of time and realize that this video is going to play itself. But the final thing I want to kind of get across, we've looked very top level at Power BI and what it can do, and clearly some work has gone into building out that dashboard there. It's very much something that we could help you with, but like I said, it is also something that you can do for yourselves. And so hopefully you can stick around for a few more minutes just to look at how you can get this into Business Central and how quick and easy it is to download data from Business Central into Power BI. And then if there's any questions, then yeah, like I said, if you're happy to stick around, I'm more than happy to stay and answer them. What we're going to do here, and I'll leave it to you to judge how brave I am, since I'm not doing this completely live, is showing how easy it is to get data from Business Central and then building out a Power BI report and then putting that report into Business Central. The idea being that although Power BI is very good at displaying data, it's sometimes nice to have that actually kind of embedded within Power BI itself. So just in the interest of speed, I've already got one of the tables that I need. I've downloaded the customer ledger entries here. But what I'm also going to do is get some more data to show you how easy it is. So I'm going to click on the Home tab from Power BI Desktop. I'm going to click Get Data and go to More here. Then I'm going to type Business Central. Click the top one, click Connect. And what's happened here, because Business Central already knows, or rather Power BI already knows I'm logged into Business Central through the single sign-on, it's already connected straight through to our demonstration tenant. So I'm going to click on our production database. That's going to open all the companies within that database. I'm going to choose Cronus, pop that open further. And then what's going to come through is all the tables that are available for reporting on. If you don't find the one that you need, we can always add more for you, but there's a huge amount of data sort of already there, already exposed for different tools to report on. So I'm going to quickly scroll down and get the customer card here. I'm just going to click on Load, and that's going to bring through all the details from the customers. And once it's done that, it's going to appear on the right hand side. So now that's appeared on the right hand side. What's really clever is if we just go into this model screen here, what you'll be able to see is that we can actually get Power BI to establish relationships between the tables that are here. Sometimes it does that automatically. In this case, it hasn't. So I'm just going to tell the system that these two sets of data are related. So I'm going to say the customer ledger entries here and the customer card here are related by the fact that number here and customer number here are the same. I'm going to change this filter direction to both. So even though you've got to kind of establish that relationship sometimes, it does do it automatically on occasion, but it's very straightforward if you need to do it manually, just like I've shown there. And so now I see that there's a line between those two showing that there's a relationship. If I go back to the main screen, now what we need to do is actually build the visualization, build the kind of report, if you like. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to click on the pie chart, and I'm going to kind of drag this to the size that I want. And I'll probably make it about half. And then what I need to do is actually give that report some data. So I'm going to pop open customer ledger entries here, and I'm going to put in the values will be my amount in local currency. And then I'm also going to put in the customer name as my details. So it's really intuitive here. We're just dragging and dropping, and then you can see here what's happened is it said, okay, well, with that data that I've got from Business Central, I can see that School of Fine Art represents 74% of my total sales, and it's important to bring that LCY field rather than amount because some of these aren't all in GBP. So now we've done that, what I'm going to do is just tidy this up a little bit. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. And you've got a lot of different kind of formatting options and things like that. So we can choose whether to show a title. If we want a title, we can just change that to say amount, let's say GB, amount in pounds by customer name. And then when I've done that, I can publish it, save my changes, I'm going to put this just up to my workspace. Once it's done that, I can then go into my Business Central and now on the Power BI reports section of the role center, if I select reports, I'd actually save this report as Power BI in BC. So I'm going to select that one, or edit the list first rather. Select this one, enable that, I'm going to disable that one, click OK. And now my report that we built in Power BI Desktop and published up into Power BI on the web is available within Business Central. What we're going to do. So the final slide I wanted to sort of touch on really is just a brief summary, some indicative pricing for Jet and Power BI. I'm really just wrap up today. Thank you for staying over the allocated time. I've obviously rambled on. But we've talked today about, you know, the value in data, how it's driving the next wave of kind of developments for business, and as well as the standard reports and account schedules in Nav and Business Central. We've looked at Power BI and Jet. There's some indicative pricing here. Should just point out that top line around implementation and training is only if we do it for you. Like I said, you can make a start on your own. So actually, I do think it's worth you having a go with Power BI, because there's a huge amount of information available to you. Jet reports, likewise, there's actually, you know, you can just hook it up and get going. There's no implementation fee if we don't do kind of report building or training for you. So it's just a license cost. But in summary, really, it's there's, you know, a variety of tools available. They do have strengths and weaknesses. I would encourage you to use standard reports, account schedules, and Power BI, you know, tomorrow if you've got the time to do it, because you can make a start with all of those. We're here if you want support and help on them as well. But yeah, like I said, thank you very much, and thank you for listening. And then just a reminder that tomorrow we've got our business process walkthroughs webinar as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Are there any?
That was really good from a watching point of view. Thanks for also coming in on your day off. You won't say it, but you have. So thank you for that.
No worries, thanks.
To talk through. We've had one question so far, and that's from Angie. So it's, does all the data from the BI reports have to be in Business Central, as all our KPIs currently sit in spreadsheet? Can we use reports to access spreadsheet data as well? We would have numerous other systems that it would be good to link to.
Yeah, great question, Angie, and thanks for hopefully sticking to the end and hearing the answer. Yeah, you can. Power BI is really great for that. It's Microsoft's approach over the last couple of years has been that as long as you're using some part of their tools, they really don't mind if your other systems aren't Microsoft systems. So Power BI can connect to spreadsheets, it can connect to Salesforce, it can connect to Oracle databases, it can connect to Amazon Web Services. So really, you briefly saw in that final video about creating a data model. Spreadsheet can be very much one source of the data, and then you would create that kind of data model, establish those links in the background to say, you know, some of my information's in the spreadsheet, some of it's in my system, some of it's in my CRM, some of it's on a different spreadsheet, and then Power BI is almost like the glue that brings all of those things together. So it's also a good reason not to necessarily have to integrate your systems if all you really wanted was a little bit out your CRM, a little bit out of a spreadsheet, and a little bit out of Business Central, because Power BI might be able to do that work for you instead.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions at all, Elliot?
That's it. We had a couple of questions about sound, but in terms of actual standard questions from the attendees, that's everything.
Okay.
The recording, I'll put the recording on the PowerHour SharePoint tomorrow. So if anyone doesn't have access to that, they can get that there. But thank you very much, Steve. Really appreciate that.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.